What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Fantasy Data's The Fantasy Facts. Today, we're going rapid fire as rapidly as I can through the entire slate of games, all 16, looking at week 5 projections from Fantasy Data. Make sure you get in there, use the promo code FACTS, get 20% off. And without further ado, these are the Fantasy Facts with your hosts, Pat Loftus and Seth Keller. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back in. We're going to try and do this as quickly as possible, hit all 16 games, give you all of the projections that are worth knowing, give you at least guys to look out for, starts, sits, that type of questions. We're going to try and make it happen. So here we go. Week 5 kicking off tonight with Indy and Denver. Without Jonathan Taylor, though, that is one of the big hits. Michael Pittman is also still questionable. That's something that you want to keep an eye on as we get ready for Thursday night to kick off. This is actually one of the lower over-under totals of the week, and one of the lower projected totals in terms of fantasy points. And Denver is expected to win by 3.5. I really don't know which way this team is going to have which way this game is going to go in real life. But I do think there's going to be some opportunities for scoring in this game. If Michael Pittman does play, he is probably my favorite start of the night. Him and Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy on the other side of the ball are probably going to be three guys that you're going to be starting in almost all of your lineups in some shape or form. Cortland Sutton has been getting a ton of targets, and Jerry Jeudy's been getting the touchdowns. Russell Wilson, I am not a huge fan of in this game. I'm also not a huge fan of Matt Ryan. If you do need to play them in super flex games, obviously that's understandable, but I'm not a huge fan of either of them. Is going to be, does Nyheim Hines pop off this week without JT there? Or do we get to see some of the other running backs come up? Honestly, I'm not that excited for either of them. The other big question is going to be Javonte Williams is done for the season. So what's going to happen in the Denver backfield? Melvin Gordon put up an absolute dud in the game last week. A lot of people have been hyping up Mike Boone as the back to own there, but let's not forget they also activated Latavius Murray. He is one of those veteran backs that just doesn't kind of go away. I think both of them, and honestly, Mike Boone is probably getting a little bit more love in DFS, but I do think you could probably get Murray super, super cheap and throw him out there as some kind of tournament style type of winner, because it could end up being any of these three backfields. I honestly think Melvin Gordon has the best opportunity, but he has been kind of a dud. So there we go with Indy and Denver. Next up on the list is the New York Giants and Green Bay. Man, oh man, have the Giants been an interesting team, and they probably have one of the best fantasy assets so far, and that's Saquon Barkley as your RB1. Yes, I know. Cooper Kupp is the best fantasy asset at the moment because he's just getting peppered with targets, but running backs are so scarce. Saquon being the RB1 right now is definitely a must start. You're going to play him, especially against a Green Bay team that they've given up some interesting games so far. I am not excited about Daniel Jones or any of the pass catching options out there. There are some guys that are getting healthier, like Wan'Dale Robinson and Kadarius Toney, but really you're not going to play them without them having a healthy game under their belts. On the opposite side of the ball, Green Bay, there are a lot of guys that you can start in this Green Bay game. And Green Bay is actually one of the higher fantasy projected total teams out there. Aaron Rodgers, you're probably going to play him if you have him, even though he hasn't been stellar so far this season. Aaron Jones has had a couple of really good games, also with A.J. Dillon. And Alan Lazard has been making a case for himself now that he's getting healthy. I see all of those guys being decent options, and Romeo Doubs as another really good option. He's really been kind of moving himself up in this Packers offense. So I'm okay starting all of them. Robert Tonyan has a chance, but it would need to be because the Green Bay Packers are throwing the ball all over the field, which is a possibility, but I just don't see the Giants being able to compete in terms of scoring with Green Bay to kind of force their hand into throwing the ball all over the field. Like I said, I think you're starting a lot of Green Bay guys. You're starting Saquon Barkley. That's kind of the Green Bay Giants game. And again, it is actually coming in 1 point under in terms of the consensus total than our Thursday night game. Moving right along, we have Pittsburgh going to Buffalo. This game is going to be interesting despite a pretty normal, pretty middle of the road over under a 46. Buffalo is projected to put up 30 points if you look at the implied total because they're being favored by 14 points over the visiting Steelers. And if you have anybody in on your fantasy roster from Buffalo, you're going to fire them up with the exception of maybe like a Zach Moss or a James Cook. You're still holding on to those guys. But you're definitely firing up Josh Allen. You're definitely firing up Stephon Diggs. You're firing up Devin Singletary probably in a flex role because you got him so late in drafts. But he's established himself as a reliable flex play. You also have Gabe Davis getting healthy. It looks like he is going to be wheels up for this game. So I am excited for that. Isaiah McKenzie, Dawson Knox, you're probably not going to play those guys unless you're absolutely desperate. And at the tight end position, you shouldn't be that desperate. And you're probably not that desperate in the wide receiver position as well. Let's not forget that Pittsburgh, despite losing one of their best defensive options in Watt with a torn pectoral, they're still a solid enough defense, right? So let's not completely count them out. I think the spread of -14 could be a bit much here to start off, but there's really not a ton to love on the Pittsburgh side of the ball. It looks like Kenny Pickett is going to go ahead and get the start over Trubisky because Trubisky just wasn't good leading up to it. And I mean, Kenny Pickett wasn't great as he came in and finished out the second half of week 4. But at least give some hope, right? There is some hope there. You're probably starting Najee Harris if you have him, even though he's been rather run-of-the-mill. And you're starting Deontay Johnson just out of sheer volume. He's, aside from this past week, he's been getting 10-plus targets every week. I think he continues that even with Kenny Pickett taking over the helm. Pat Freiermuth is a decent enough play if you punt it on tight end. And George Pickens is kind of your big play type of guy there. I don't mind him as an option, but again, not somebody that I'm necessarily working desperately into my lineups. But again, an option if you have them out there. Moving right along, we have the Chargers going to the Browns. This game is coming in as one of the top 5 over-unders of the week. Which again implies a lot of points being scored, with the Chargers getting the favoritism of only 2.5 points, which seems a bit interesting considering the love that the Chargers have, especially love in terms of fantasy. You have, of course, Justin Herbert and Austin Eckler are your must starts for the Chargers. Mike Williams is coming up to be a must start, but Keenan Allen is a guy that you want to keep your eye on to see what's going on in terms of his status. He has been questionable. He's had some games where he hasn't been able to play. That may cannibalize a little bit of the Mike Williams love or the Gerald Everett love, because Gerald Everett has been able to be a pretty reliable tight end option. So I do not mind starting Everett and Mike Williams. And really, I like starting Mike Williams if Keenan Allen's out. If Keenan Allen's back in there, I think you can start them all as more flex plays. I'm not as excited about working them into a wide receiver 3. And if I'm in a 2 wide receiver league, I'm probably not nearly as excited of working them into a 2 wide receiver league if Keenan Allen does play. On the other side of the ball, we have the Cleveland Browns. Nick Chubb has been phenomenal. He is, depending on league settings, he could be one of the guys at the top in the running back position. He is an auto start for you if you have him. Jacoby Brissett is whatever Amari Cooper is whatever. Kareem Hunt is another one that you're going to roll out there if you have them. And David Njoku is a guy that's been gaining some popularity, especially his, I guess, pop onto the scene. And I believe it was week 3. And Donovan Peoples-Jones has been a nice little DFS play. If you have him, he has found the end zone a couple of times already this season. But again, I'm favoring the Chargers out of this, not so much the Cleveland Browns. So I'm definitely starting the majority of my Charger players in terms of fantasy. And the Cleveland players, I'll roll out a handful of them, and I'll mix a few into some of my DFS lineups. But nobody that I'm overly excited about that I'm saying you have to get them in outside of course, Nick Chubb for Cleveland. Next up on the 1 o'clock slate, we have Chicago Bears traveling to the Minnesota Vikings. This is going to be an interesting game in the sense that Minnesota should finally have a chance to really dominate a game against the Bears. The Bears have been extremely lackluster so far. So I could see the Vikings kind of holding on to this. And that's what Vegas is putting out there with a 7-point spread, one of the largest spreads of the week, and a pretty middle of the road 44 over under. Of course, giving Minnesota the added bonus of being implied to score 3+ touchdowns, and that's definitely going to come at the hands of Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, and possibly Adam Thielen in there as well. Kirk Cousins should have himself a decent day. Dalvin Cook should also have himself a decent day. And we're really expecting Justin Jefferson to be more like week 1 and week 4 than he was in week 2 and week 3. He is an auto start for me, along with, I would say, Cook. Thielen is the one guy that's like, we'll see if I work him into my lineup or not. I might start a guy like, I would start a guy probably like Amari Cooper-ish, maybe over Adam Thielen. Donovan Peoples-Jones in a DFS play, I might start him over because he's probably going to be a bit cheaper depending on what platform you're playing on. For the Bears, there is really not much to like in the Bears offense until we get a little bit more clarity. David Montgomery is still questionable from his injury last week. Khalil Herbert has played really well, so it kind of creates this imbalance of even if David Montgomery is healthy, what are we going to get in that type of split? Because Khalil Herbert has been a really good option for the Bears so far, at least in fantasy play. Everybody else, I mean, we talked about it on Tuesday. Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, those guys could essentially all be cuts for you because they've just been so atrociously bad. This could be the week that Chicago starts unlocking some things because Minnesota doesn't have exactly a vaunted defense. But again, I am not getting excited about really much out there for Chicago. They really need to prove it on the field before you can start any of those guys outside of maybe Herbert or Montgomery. And again, that depends on what we get out of that backfield. And it'll be tough to say what that is until we get both Montgomery and Khalil Herbert healthy in this backfield. All right, moving right along, the amazing story of the Detroit Lions. It must be the hard knock bump working out for them here. And the New England Patriots. New England has been a relatively low-scoring team, and Detroit has been a really high-scoring team. And it's really interesting to see that the New England Patriots are favored by 3 in this game. There is a bit to be said that Bill Belichick has owned Goff, maybe, but man, oh man, this is I chose the Lions as an upset, and they almost were able to pull it off last week. I think this game, the Lions do get the chance to upset the New England Patriots. New England, it looks like it's going to be starting Bailey Zappi. He filled in admirably after Hoyer went out for the almost the entire game this past week. This is right in the middle in terms of over-under of 45.5. And in terms of fantasy points projections, it's actually the highest fantasy projected game of the week, which makes it really interesting because it's not the highest over under of the week. And there's definitely a lot of guys to love here. First of all, Jared Goff has been outperforming just about every one of his projections. So I am wheels up on Jared Goff, even though there is the Belichick shuts down Jared Goff narrative. I'm wheels up on him. He's been playing fine. Yes, it could end up burning me, but if I'm starting Jared Goff, I've been rolling a wave of point scoring for him so far. Jamal Williams is a start, especially if Swift cannot go. All of the Craig Reynolds possibility was quickly shut down with just not any involvement in the offense there. Amon-Ra St. Brown is questionable and hopefully can get back on the field. Definitely monitor that, but I am excited for Amon-Ra to come back. Hockenson is not going to do the same thing he did last week. Let's throw that out there. He's not, but he is a good play here. Again, you probably got Hockenson late as a tight end option. So wheels up on Hawk. Again, don't expect another 30, 40-point game out of him, but I think you can start him with confidence being a tight end one this week. And then the big question is whether or not Swift is going to be healthy or not. If he is healthy, I think you can plug him into your lineups. If he's not, obviously don't. If he's not, fire up all of the Jamal Williams. He played great. And also Josh Reynolds is carving out a role. Yes, Shark was out, but Josh Reynolds looked great in his kind of lead role this past week. So I am all right, especially if you can get him any type of discounted way into a DFS lineup or like an underdog draft, which if you're in an underdog draft, go ahead and check out Fantasy Facts as the promo code, just facts. That's FAQS for underdog, and you'll get a deposit match on your first deposit up to 100%. Great way to get yourself involved in some drafts, some pick 'em where you can choose higher or lower on certain guys. It's a great way to stay involved in the fantasy season, especially if your fantasy team isn't doing quite so well right now. There's your quick commercial. There you go. You're welcome. On the other side of the ball, New England, Damien Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, good to go. Fire them up. Let's have them take over this game because Mac Jones may or may not play this game. We'll have to check to see whether or not he gets a practice in today. Other than that, I'm not really excited for many of the other pass catching options because I kind of don't trust Zappe or Hoyer. Zappe was able to put in a score with Devontae Parker, but am I really going to put Devontae Parker in a lineup and feel good about it? I am not. Same thing with Jacoby Myers. Again, Jacoby Myers is Mr. Steady Eddie, but this offense really makes me nervous here. I'm going all the way against Vegas here with this over under, unless it's all Detroit scoring the ball. And I'm definitely going against Vegas in the fact that New England, I do not see New England putting up almost 25 points. So Detroit all the way, fire them up. That's where I am going there. Next game on the 1:00 slate is Seattle against New Orleans. New Orleans without Jameis Winston this past week had a fun little double doink type of situation in London. I'm sure that was a great game for all the London fans to watch. But Winston has been dealing with some back issues, and I am nervous about putting him into my lineup. Even if he does get the healthy slate, I am a little bit nervous putting him in there. What I am not nervous about, though, is Chris Olave. He has been phenomenal. I am firing up as much Chris Olave as possible. The other big question marks are Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. If you were like me and did a little bit of partying Saturday night and woke up and went, holy crap, he's out. That sucks. Kudos. I feel your pain. Not kudos, but yeah, we feel the same pain. But if you are smarter than that, kudos to you. Kamara, though, it looks like he's trending towards healthy for this week. But again, you definitely want to monitor that. You definitely want to monitor Michael Thomas. If either of them play, I am wheels up on both of them. I'm excited to see what New Orleans can do against the Seattle team that has been allowing just a ton of points. This game, in terms of Vegas, is being favored 5.5 to New Orleans. Again, middle of the road kind of over under at 46. In terms of fantasy projections, though, New Orleans is projected as an entire team to score almost 30 more almost 30 more fantasy points than the Seattle Seahawks. And that's part of the reason why I am all excited to get those New Orleans guys into my lineup. Again, this right now is assuming healthy play from Kamara and Michael Thomas. All of that changes if they cannot go. But again, it looks like that's going to happen. On the Seattle side of the ball, Geno is coming off a phenomenal week. He was probably snatched up off waivers almost all over the place. DK Metcalf is coming off of being carted off the field for bathroom breaks, apparently. And Rashad Penny coming off of a phenomenal game. I think they come back down a little bit, especially Geno and Rashad Penny, but I am rolling them out if I have them. Outside of that, Tyler Lockett is a play, but is definitely one of those boom bust type of plays, as he's always been. I don't mind getting him in there because, I mean, who else? The tight end plays have been getting a little bit of love. And I have started Will Disley on a couple occasions already this week, just out of sheer desperation at the tight end position. I don't recommend it. But Seattle, you have your main group of guys there. You're going to start Geno, probably not over guys that you were drafting ahead of time, but you're probably going to start them if you picked them up off of waivers just out of desperation. And hey, that happens. You're definitely starting them in super flex leagues, though. And then Metcalf, Penny, definitely in rosters, probably in starting rosters. And Tyler Lockett, probably in as a flex play. Could be a game where New Orleans really gets right. And a few more games in the 1:00 slate. We have Miami going to the New Jersey Jets, and Zach Wilson getting another go here. Breece Hall has been taking over in terms of percent of offense. You know, that's one of the things that I personally look at. I don't like snap percentages. I don't like touch share as much. I really like to look at percent of offense, which is how much of the offense is actually running through a specific player. And Breece Hall was over 30% this past week. You saw a steady incline for Breece Hall. You saw Michael Carter kind of plateauing at a much lower clip. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this Miami game, because Miami isn't necessarily known for their defense as well. The Jets, definitely not. We could get a bit of a boat race, high scoring game here, and I would be all for it. I think there is a lot that could happen here. The Miami Dolphins are still one of the higher projected teams, even with what looks like Teddy Bridgewater being the quarterback under center. If you watch the game, you saw Tua go out in kind of a disturbing fashion. It looks like the team is going to be keeping him out, at least for this week. And we'll see how much longer it takes for him to clear concussion protocols this time around. Miami is favored by 3 points. So we have a decent scoring output here in the Miami side of the ball. Oh, let's finish up the Jets real quick. Garrett Wilson, start him. Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, I'm not excited about getting them into lineups. Same thing with Michael Carter. If I have Michael Carter, I am slowly starting to fade him or trying to trade him away. Because Breece Hall, like I said, is on that steady increase. If you want to keep Michael Carter as a handcuff type of play, that's fine. Just know he's probably not going to be in any starting lineups or worth being in any starting lineups for the foreseeable future, unless he gets a couple of touchdowns. On the Miami side of the ball, you are firing up Tyreek Hill. You are firing up Jalen Waddle, even though Waddle put up a bit of a stinker with Teddy under center, but that's all right. I totally expect him with more time to build that rapport. They're going to be just fine. I do not like any of the running backs in this situation. They could find their way into the end zone. They could get an opportunity. So if you're doing some kind of tournament DFS plays, sure, throw them in there as an option because again, the Jets aren't necessarily known for being the best defense out there. So if you want to fire up Mostert or Edmonds, that's fine. In that situation, I am not putting them into starting lineups with any confidence. Just because even if Miami does get a bit of a lead, it's hard to tell which of those guys is going to be the guy that's going to be handling the rock when all is said and done. It could be Mostert like it was last week. It could be Edmonds, which it was for the few weeks prior. All right. Moving along, next 1:00 game, we have the Atlanta Falcons traveling to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yes, Tom Brady has some personal stuff going on in his life that could impact him in terms of his fantasy or NFL production. Let's not get too much into that speculation, though. Honestly, he's just been not that exciting. Yes, there's been suspensions. Yes, there's been injuries, but this offense just hasn't clicked in the way that you thought that it would when you were drafting these players. Brady, though, is probably still a start, especially in super flex leagues. If you don't have a better option, I'm probably not starting a Teddy Bridgewater over him. I'm not starting Zach Wilson over him. I'm not starting some of those guys that have, a Geno and stuff like that. I'm not starting those guys over him. I'm still going to roll with Tom Brady and his experience, especially against an Atlanta team that can give up points. Lenny Fournette, I'm firing him up, even though there's a whole lot of love going out for Rachaad White. If White is somehow still floating around down rosters, probably not. But if it is, you definitely want to make sure that you scoop him up. But I see Lenny coming back. Tampa Bay just was not able to get anything going last week, and they gave up on the running game so early on. The running game totaled -3 yards for I think they may have finished at that point, but it was at -3 for almost the entire game. Lenny, I think, comes back against a defense in Atlanta that can give up points. Mike Evans is back. You're firing him up if you have him. Chris Godwin looks like he is back. You definitely want to monitor that, but you're firing him up if you have him. I am probably not touching Russell Gage, and I may be throwing Julio Jones into some DFS plays just because his involvement week 1 was enough where it's like, hey, maybe week 4 his involvement was down just because of game plan and the way that game kind of shook out. But again, I'm not trying to work him into any managed leagues, and I'm doing that as like, hey, I'm putting in 20, 30 lineups. And usually I don't put in quite that many. Usually for me, it's around like 10 lineups into a tournament just because I don't have the time to do all that, doing all of this. But I may throw him into some of that. Rachaad White, again, I'm putting him on the bench. I'm not ready to see it yet. Or not ready to see it yet, but I haven't seen quite enough yet where I'm putting him in as a starter or even as a flex play. Unless my team is just absolutely demolished with injuries, which, hey, I have a couple of those out there. I'm not excited about having Rachaad White in my starting lineup yet. I think there is a possibility, especially if Lenny goes down. Rachaad White is, fire him up, get him in as much as possible. But right now, it's a little bit more of a wait and see. And let's see how this develops in another game plan, and let's see if he's worked as much as he's been in the past. On the Atlanta side of the ball, huge question here is going to be who gets the majority of the work. To me, it is all about Tyler Algier. It is not Caleb Huntley, but it could be that. I am firing up Algier in some leagues where I am running back depleted, and I've had Algier scooped up a little bit beforehand just as an insurance policy for Cordarrelle Patterson, who is now on IR for the next 4 weeks minimum. So if, again, either of these two are out there, kind of like Rachaad White, probably not, but hey, it could be. Go ahead and scoop them up if you have the opportunity to. You are firing up London, and man, oh man, May the fantasy gods have mercy on you if you are in this position, but you're probably starting Kyle Pitts if you have him. Yes, it sucks. Yes, he's been atrocious. Yes, yes, yes. It is painful every time, but chances are you probably don't have a better option than Kyle Pitts at the tight end position. But man, it's one of the ones where you plug your nose and you go, "Dear God, please let this be the week he finally achieves the status that he should be at." But yeah, I'm not that excited. Not that excited for it, but you got to play him if you have them. This is expected to be one of the higher scoring games, with Tampa Bay being one of the higher scoring teams in not only fantasy, but also in real life. The Bucs are favored by 8.5. I think Atlanta kind of keeps that maybe a little bit closer, but we'll see what happens. All right, a couple more to go until we get done with this 1:00 slate. We have the Tennessee Titans traveling to the Washington Commanders. This is, again, a rather low over-under at 42.5 and a rather low fantasy output expected here. There's not a whole lot to love in this game, so we're just going to try and go through it quickly. Derrick Henry, fire him up. After that, yeah, that's basically it. Monitor Treylon Burks. He's probably going to be out with turf toe, but monitor him. There is a possibility that he is in there. Ryan Tannehill, even though Washington has not been a good defense, I'm just not excited for what Tannehill has done. He has no second half touchdowns so far this season, which is just mind-blowing that's happened. Robert Woods, again, if you have him, yeah, maybe you work him in as a flex, especially against a weak Washington defense. Wentz, same thing as Tannehill. I'm not excited even against a weak Tennessee defense. Not that excited. I'm not that excited for really anybody in this Washington game. I'm probably playing Terry McLaurin if I have him. I'm probably playing Curtis Samuel if I have him, and don't have a better option out there just because of the volume that Curtis Samuel has gotten so far this season. And Gibson and McKissick, I can't get a read on this game, whether or not it's going to be a blowout one way or another. So I see this kind of being a Gibson-McKissick split that has been happening for a while. And if Brian Robinson is on waivers still, please go out, pick him up early. He could just be a third head in this RB monster committee. But it's worth a shot at this point because chances are you're probably going to need a running back at some point. And like I said, I'm not feeling good about rolling out Gibson or McKissick. I don't feel good about rolling out, Dontrell Hilliard. If I have Henry, I'm definitely firing him up though. All right. That was Tennessee and Washington. Next up is a battle of the teams that have been tanking the past couple years. Houston and Jacksonville, both of them having something to be a little bit excited for as we move through 2022. A relatively low but not atrocious over-under at 43. In terms of projected fantasy points, though, both of them are pretty low. And Jacksonville getting a 7-point favorite spread. I don't know how I feel about that. That definitely feels like something that I might be able to take advantage of in terms of betting. But you have some great super flex quarterbacks here. Nobody that you're really that excited about firing up outside of super flex, though, and Trevor Lawrence and Davis Mills. Lawrence obviously gets the nod if you have to. Lawrence probably gets a nod over guys like Tannehill and Carson Wentz. But again, I feel like they're in a pretty similar tier where it's like, hey, I'm going to fire him up if I got him, but chances are, I'm not excited. I'm not ecstatic about them being there. You have some interesting plays on the Jacksonville side with Christian Kirk and Zay Jones as pass catchers. And James Robinson, I think, is going to be your running back leader here. Once again, Travis Etienne has been fluctuating in his involvement in this offense. I think everybody's still waiting for him to pop off. I think that opportunity will happen this year. I do not see James Robinson holding on to the lead back position here, and ETN just taking such a back role. I definitely see this. There being some more fluctuations here, and obviously any type of injury to either one of them. Not so much Travis Etienne. I don't think an injury to Etienne really bumps up James Robinson, but an injury to James Robinson, I definitely think skyrockets Etienne as a fantasy option. Outside of that, I'm not really excited. I've been desperate in some tight end punting situations where I threw Evan Ingram in there. I'm probably not going to fire him up. I hopefully have transitioned to another tight end. But if you got him, smoke him. Sure, whatever. But chances are there's probably better options out there for you. For the Houston game, I am excited for Cooks and Pierce. Probably a little bit maybe of Nico Collins, but outside of that, there's not much to love here. Pierce, I think, is just establishing himself as one of the top rookies that we have right now. Somewhat out of just necessity, but volume definitely being the case here. I am firing up Damien Pierce as a starting running back in some places. And I feel absolutely fine with him being a starting running back on my fantasy squads. Next up, we finally get into the 4:00 games. We have San Francisco traveling to Carolina. This, honestly, I see this game. It is the lowest over under. And honestly, Vegas might be over predicting the over under here at 39. Carolina has a pretty decent defense. It's just their offense is god awful. San Francisco is happy with just winning games and moving the ball down the field. That's part of the reason why Jimmy G is that quarterback that San Fran just kind of can't get rid of, because they're perfectly happy with him doing that type of thing. And I feel like this is a situation where we're going to see plenty of that. We're going to see a field position battle. And unless Debo does what he did against Jacksonville, shout out to him kind of not shaming Jalen Ramsey, but yeah, if you're gonna talk, don't be shocked if the other person talks back when you miss what should be a wide open tackle. Granted, Debo is on another level, but yeah, unless we get some Debo big plays like that, which are always a possibility, I see this game being well under 39 points. This is one of those type of games where, you could see a 16-6 type of finish, a 15-6, just all field goals type of finish. But I think you fire up Debo no matter what. You're firing up Jeff Wilson no matter what. You're firing up Christian McCaffrey no matter what. And then outside of that, good Lord, Baker looks absolutely atrocious. I am not touching him. DJ Moore is one of those guys where I have benched recently because he has just been unable to, really not him being unable. Baker Mayfield has been unable to get him the rock. And yeah, the entire Carolina offense, I want no part of until I can see Baker Mayfield do something, or until we make a quarterback change like the Steelers just did. On the flip side of the ball, Jimmy Garoppolo, again, I don't see him scoring touchdowns unless it's some kind of big play from Debo or Ayuk or Jeff Wilson. So I am not excited about him being in there. I honestly put him in kind of that Davis Mills range where you might get a little bit of something out of him, but it really is, it's going to be a shock when it happens. It's going to be a pleasant shock, but it's going to be a shock when it does happen. But Jeff Wilson and Ayuk, as mentioned, already ready to be fired up. George Kittle is one of those tight ends. You probably don't have a better option at tight end, even though he has just been, unless when he was hurt in the first 2 weeks, you were able to snag like a Gerald Everett or a Tyler Higbee or something like that. You probably don't have a better option than George Kittle at tight end. And you're probably looking to him to score if that is the case. So you're probably going to play him. But he is one of those guys where, again, I'm not excited to get him, not excited to have him in a lineup, but it's one of those type of guys where, man, he should be coming alive at some point, hopefully soon. All right, next up on the list, we have my Dallas Cowboys traveling to the Rams. This is not homerism here. I think the Cowboys beat the Rams. I think that offensive line of the Rams is just absolutely atrocious. And I think the Cowboys can scheme up enough ways of getting Michael Parsons after Matt Stafford that I do not want any part of the Rams offense outside of Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee. I do not want Matt Stafford, especially after the stinker that he put up this past week. I think the Cowboys defense, yes, it is not on the same level as the San Francisco 49ers defense, but they have a lot of guys that can get after the quarterback, and I see the Cowboys being able to do that. And I am not scared of Cam Akers or Darrell Henderson being able to beat the Cowboys running the ball. Again, that offensive line cannot move the line of scrimmage in order to give Akers or Henderson really any push before they're meeting defenders. So I don't want to play Akers. I don't want to play Henderson. I don't want to play Allen Robinson. I don't want to play Stafford. And that really leaves you with Kupp and Higbee. And again, if you have to, my bet is this is probably a Henderson game over an Akers type of game because I see the Cowboys being able to move the ball. I see CeeDee Lamb being a great option here. You have to play him if you have him. Cooper Rush is one of those guys where in Superflex, absolutely fire him up. In one quarterback leagues, you probably have better options out there. And he is doing a great job managing the game, but he is not necessarily a fantasy option in terms of a top point scorer. But again, in Superflex, absolutely fire him up. One quarterback, I'd be a lot more hesitant plugging him in. When it comes to Zeke and Pollard, I see this as more of this could be either a Zeke getting a decent number of receptions game or a Tony Pollard game because the Rams still do have a pretty formidable front. Just having Aaron Donald there alone makes them a formidable defensive front. So I am tempering some expectations in terms of rushing the ball. Dalton Schultz, I want to see him coming back and being really healthy, but he is one of those guys where if you have him, you might be firing him up this week. Again, he is still, last I checked, he still does have a questionable tag on him. So definitely be aware of that. And I am going to take the Cowboys and the points. They are getting 5.5 in this game. I am definitely taking the Cowboys to cover that spread. And I might put a little sprinkling of some shekels on them just on the money line, because that should be a pretty decent money line payout for the Cowboys if they are able to win. It looks like they're plus 192 right now. So I'll put a little bit of money on my boys to just flat out beat the Rams. All right, next 4:00 game is the Philadelphia Eagles traveling to the Arizona Cardinals. We have we actually have all three of the highest scoring games coming up right now. And it starts with Philly and Arizona, over under of 49 projected fantasy points. They're in actually a little bit lower, but still one of the top five or six teams there. Philly is expected to win this game, giving up 5 points. And it's because of Jalen Hurts. If you have him, you are definitely firing up Jalen Hurts. If you have Kyler Murray, you're definitely firing him up, even though this Philly defense has been pretty formidable. If you have a guy like Kyler Murray, you're going to keep him in there because even though Philly's been great defensively, Kyler Murray could pick up the slack with rushing the ball. So I'm going to go ahead and put him in there. A.J. Brown, you're firing up. Miles Sanders, you're firing up tentatively maybe, but you are definitely firing him up. It depends on game flow, but I am going to get him in there. Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, all guys you're going to fire up pretty happily. Marquise Brown on Arizona, you're going to get him in the game. You're going to get James Conner in the game. You're going to get Zach Ertz in the game. And you may be getting Rondell Moore in the game. Maybe not. But that's definitely one that you want to throw in there. I'm going to try and speed up to actually live up to the 45-minute piece that I said. Up next, Cincy and Baltimore. Again, you're firing up both of the quarterbacks. You're firing up Lamar Jackson. You're firing up Joe Burrow. You're firing up Chase, Higgins, Mixon, maybe Boyd. I'm firing up Hayden Hurst, even though he does have a questionable tag on him, but I am firing him up in there. On the Baltimore side of the ball, again, Jackson, Andrews, definitely firing them up. Dobbins, check health, but he is looks like good to go. Firing him up. And then you have Bateman that you're going to fire up as well. I am not excited about guys like Devin Duvernay, Justice Hill, things like that. Not going to go anywhere near those guys, or Andy Isabella, who they just picked up off of practice squads. Not getting excited about them. You're hitting those main guys really hard. And then for the last game of the night, the Monday night game, you have the Las Vegas Raiders going to Kansas City. This should be another fun game, a divisional game. It's projected. Vegas has it as 51 in terms of fantasy points, 209 combined fantasy points between these teams. The Chiefs' implied points is 29. Vegas 22. So there should be plenty of scoring going around. And a lot of guys that you're just going to be firing up because you're going to be firing them up anyways. Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Clyde is a guy that you're going to throw in there. Maybe not as the starting running back because you didn't have to buy him as get him in drafts as a starting running back, but he's a guy that's worked his way in there, but definitely feeling good about him as a flex. You have Juju that's been a bit disappointing, been a little under projections, but I'm still riding him. I think that we're going to get a little bit more connection there. And MVS, Marcus Valdez-Scantling, you're probably going to play him again, flexing him out, maybe wide receiver 3, but all decent guys that you can play. And keep an eye on guys like McKinnon and Pacheco. They're not going into any rosters, but keep an eye on them. They're worth having on your roster if you got this space. On the other side of the ball, Devontae Adams is an insta start. Derek Carr is a guy that I think kind of fits into, like we mentioned, a lot of that super flex, low-end QB1 type of play. And I'm perfectly fine having him there, especially against the Kansas City defense that can be beat, and especially considering that this is a game that's probably going to be a bit of a shootout. I could see this being a game where we have 6, 7, 8 scores, touchdowns being scored. Josh Jacobs coming off a phenomenal week last week. I definitely see him having another good week, not what he had last week, but another good week. He's going to be, if not in as a starting running back, definitely in as a flex play. And then Darren Waller is my other start there. It looks like Hunter Renfrow might be coming back from concussion, so you want to keep an eye on that. It could be dimming a bit of the shine from Mac Hollins, who was a big bright spot for a couple of weeks there, but maybe dimming that just a touch. And there it is, folks. There is week 5. Maybe not 45 minutes, but week 5 in less than 50 minutes. All done for you. Be sure to give me a follow. I am at FF the At Home Dad on Twitter. Be sure to give the show The Fantasy Facts at The Fantasy Facts on Twitter. Give Fantasy Data a follow on Twitter as well at Fantasy Data NFL. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Twitter. Check us out wherever you're getting all of your podcast, fantasy news. Check us out. Give us a like, subscribe, turn on notifications on YouTube. With that being said, I'll catch you on the flip side.